There are many paths to success, to prosperity in running a design firm and running a business. And my guests this week have taken many of those paths, be it writing books, teaching at a university, offering online courses, even building and developing their own projects. This week, I'm happy to speak with Alex Gore and Lance Cayko of F9 Productions. Stay tuned. Giving architects and landscape architects the tools and strategies to be seen, heard, and valued in the marketplace, and telling the stories of leaders building thriving design firms and attracting their ideal clients. This is From Architecture to Profitecture. I'm your host, Jay Krakowski. Let's get started. Fellow and future Profitex, hello, how are you? Welcome to this week's show. We are talking about the notions of autonomy and opportunity. They're pretty powerful words, especially in terms of running, owning, succeeding with your own design firm. And this week's guests have had many opportunities come their way, or rather they have created many opportunities by being involved in different aspects of, yes, capitalism and in publicity and publication. And I'm very happy to welcome them in this week. Lance and Alex, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having us. What a cool intro. We're very excited to be here.
Absolutely. That was a phenomenal intro. And thank you, Jake, for getting my name pronounced correctly at the end there.
I was looking forward to you messing it up.
I was kind of too.
That.
It's a great icebreaker, Cayko, Yeah. Now it's Cayko.
That's what I told myself first until I started, listening to past interviews of yours and quickly avoided that mistake. So awesome. Absolutely. Well, no, I really appreciate you being here. There are a lot of different avenues that I've seen you and F9 go. There's a lot of places I want to take today's conversation, but perhaps I'd like to briefly start at the beginning during the Great Recession when F9 came to be, and thought it'd be important to talk about maybe some of the lessons that you learned either in just starting the firm or working through coming out of a recession that may have informed you, where you are today.
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview and maybe I'll let Lance go into details. But so the recession, I was working for a firm, Daniel Liebskin. This is an architecture podcast, so probably all of you know him. Lance was working for Studio HT, which won Young Architects of the Year way back in 2008 or something, 2006. And I just want to highlight the two lessons because I know Lance loves to talk. And the two lessons that I learned, because a lot of people almost everyone starts off in a firm. That's how you get your hours. That's how you do everything. And when Lance and I started the firm, there was two major things that just switched in our brains. One was, okay, we are quote unquote the bosses now. So we don't have to do the way things were set up. So we could rethink the way we set up our template, the way we set up our practice and all that. And we changed our mindset to how do we best mimic reality? How do we best mimic construction in everything we do? Change every little nuance towards that perspective.
I have a previous podcast on that structure actually creates freedom. It took me a number of years to wrap my head around that, wanting to be the free spirit, and maybe it's my astrology too, but not want to be tied down by anything. I'm a sole practitioner. I went out on my own because I want the ultimate level of freedom. Well, if you don't have any processes in place, your profitability very quickly goes south.
You might be familiar with one of my favorite guys, Jocko Willink. He's a Navy SEAL. Discipline equals freedom. Structure equals freedom.
And that's with him. That's in all caps. Yeah. So
yes.
Oh yeah. All caps, double bold, underlined.
Yeah.
Yeah. He scares me. I couldn't read the book. Alex wanted me to read the book. I'm like, it's scary to me.
Well, that was David Goggins. So if you know,
right. He's another intense creature. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he is.
I'm intense enough. It's all good.
Yeah. We're not running on broken feet here. So
right.
Yeah. As he did.
The second thing was like, okay, again, quote unquote, the boss is like, no one else is telling us what to do. Why can't we share this? And if you know Mark's love, learn, share, it first came from the sharing, hey, we wanted great employees because we wanted to do well. So how do we share with the university? And we can talk about that backstory. But then since it's our content and everything that we're putting together, and we paid some college friends that were laid off at the time too to help develop it, there was nothing stopping us from either making that air or that good move. Mm-hmm. Because if you're at a firm and it's 5 people or 500, you just don't get to take their template and their processes and their models and everything and say, hey, we're just going to sell this to your competition.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just going to share this. But since it was us, we could do that.
What I would add to that is diversity. So the biggest thing I think the lessons we took from our former firms, great firms, we really want to stress that like these are world-class architects we used to work for. But I'm not sure they were world-class businessmen in the sense, or women in the sense that it was just a monoculture of projects, right? So for instance, the firm I worked for before we getting laid off, they were dealing with houses for the 1% of the 1%. I mean, very upper echelon people that can only afford houses in Boulder, Aspen, San Francisco, places like that, very elite kind of clients. And then on the opposite side, Alex was, they were just doing master plans for cities.
The 1% of the 1%.
Yeah. And so what we recognize is that there's a large sector of society that is not, that can't afford architecture services because architects are just putting it out of reach. As a matter of fact, I just had somebody in my office this morning and I gave them that exact little speech. And I said, we try to make it architecture available for the other 98% of people out there. But we could not have done that and gone after the multitude of different projects all the way down from a little tiny kitchen remodel, which we still do, all the way up to a multi-million-dollar 40 unit, above $10 million mark, commercial mixed use project. We could not have done that unless we built that foundation that Alex already talked about with our templates and getting everybody on the same page and honing that in so that we had the ability to provide affordable services but still be profitable because we're getting it right from the beginning.
So we have the structures in place so that you can pick and choose kitchen remodels if you want to, or other projects. How did the thought process evolve with you to start incorporating the development and the construction side into the practice?
Lance and I both have construction backgrounds. Lance has one a little bit more than myself. And this actually aligns with what we'll probably talk about later, but the course that we're launching. And to us, it's crazy how much work architects put into a process, to a project, how much responsibility they take on, and seeing that the reward mainly goes to someone else didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It was, you're doing all this, you still have almost the same liability, same risk, all that stuff, but the reward is going somewhere else. And we have a saying at our firm is more responsibility equals more reward. Mm-hmm. So I don't even think I remember the start of the question.
I do. Yeah. I mean, that's where we're at now. I think we've proven it. You take on more responsibility, the more reward you get, financial, and then, in a bunch of different ways, obviously. But one of our first design build projects was a tiny house, and we built that. We took out actually a small business loan for it. It was kind of on the fly sort of thing. How it started was we were still barely getting any design work during the Great Recession when Alex and I started the business. And one of our other friends was gainfully employed because he had a lot of state work up in South Dakota, but he hated his job. And so Alex and I are kind of sort of on the whim people. I mean, we just kind of, once we know that it's a good idea to do something, we run right at it. And so our friend brought up tiny houses, and we said, "Oh man, you should build one. What's stopping you? How much money do you have?" And he's like, "I don't know, like 25,000 or something like that. That's plenty. You should come down to Colorado. We'll design it. We'll build it." He didn't believe us. So we went home because we were out celebrating after we got one of our very first commissions, a little duplex. And we bought the domain name. It was called at that time, Blake'sTinyHouse.com. And this was about 10 years ago when the tiny house movement really started to take off. And it was because of the Great Recession, right? Another Great Recession lesson here, because people were starting to downsize. They decided they didn't need McMansions anymore.
Right.
All the financial turmoil with the housing market. And we emailed him the next day and said, we guess you're doing it. Well, he never did it, but we did work with him and another colleague from college. And the organic following we got because of that website was incredible. So jump ahead to a few years from there. It was such a cool design, and it got picked up by so many publications. We were like, we just felt compelled to build the thing. And it was maybe our first opportunity to really act as architect, as builder / developer, and doing exactly what you want to do. I think that's always driven us too, is like this idea that you have so much more control if you have all three of those hats. Alex went down to the builders. It was a home and garden show in Denver.
Oh, yeah. So I just went to the home and garden show just because it was fun. And there was some tiny houses, and it said, hey, sign up if you're building a tiny house. We're having a TV show. So I signed up. Yeah, I'm building a tiny house. Obviously lying.
Well, I mean, again, there was no real commitment other than we have a website, we have this following, we have the plans.
Yep.
Sure, we're building it.
We had schematic level plans. We didn't.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're getting publicity just from that level of
a lot of it.
Yep.
And they called me and said, we're filming a show. We want you to be on it. Can you build this in a month? And we're like, no, we got to finish the plans. It it transforms the tiny house. Then we'd have to get funding for it. Then we'd have to actually build it. So we said, give us 2 months. And they said, okay. So we got the plans done, the funding, and then built it all in 2 months. And it's been great. And I want to actually talk, your first question I thought was kind of important. What are the lessons learned? What did you transition, when you became builders, not builders, have your own firm? And one of the things that Leapskin said was, do a fun project.
Once a year.
And then Lance just said, I like the idea, do a project where you have control once a year. Because then you can put your talents on display. And that's another thing that we knew in the back of our head. It's like, okay, we're going to do this. Hopefully the built thing will get even more publicity, but it should be fun. Obviously construction's hard, but if it doesn't meet that box, it's something that you want to do, right? And I was talking to this other client, and he was asking me how long the architecture process takes. And it was taking longer than he expected. I go, well, a lot of times the client wants input. We send it to you. You take a week or two back, and it goes back and forth like that. And he's like, well, I'm not an architect. I don't do this for a living. Shouldn't your suggestions be better? And we were on a good rapport. I go, oh, my suggestions will be better than yours. But sometimes a client has particularities, and I didn't mention this. Sometimes there's really good clients that have a great eye, so I'm not knocking that. But
sure.
In this instance, I'm like, yeah, a lot of times my suggestions are better. So if you just trust me, we'll just execute it. It's like, yeah, that's why I'm paying you. So that doesn't always happen. So if you can carve out that project where it's fun or you get to do it, I think it will resonate with a lot of other people.
100%, especially if it's timely, like I talked about with the rise in the popularity. Like there was this organic groundswell, and it really pushed us to do that. And then once we were on HGTV, and then we submitted to Architizer, and we ended up winning the Architizer, an International Architecture Award, our very first one from Architizer for that. I mean, it really came full circle, and it was like, that was one of the best intuitive decisions I think we made early on. And since we had that kind of success, and then it was publicized the way it was, a Fortune 500 company got a hold of us after seeing that first tiny house. They loved how out of the box it was. And they recognized also that, holy cow, only maybe somebody like Alex and Lance and their team of architects who also build these very intricate folding things that are highly engineered and very precise. We think they're the only people who could build us 2 more. And then, so we ended up doing that. We ended up doing that for them. At first we weren't going to take on the project because it's really hard to build. I mean, it's just, you're taking raw materials and you're making something out of nothing. And especially if you're creating something brand new, like these tiny houses that we did, I had a little bit of pain from that. And then Alex was like, well, what if we told them this fee? And I said, sure, if they go for that. And then they did. And it was profitable enough for us with that second design build project for that company that we had enough money in profitability that we just said we targeted a third of an acre up here in Longmont where our headquarters is. And that's where we financed a piece of land, and we're, on the track to become full-scale architect as builder/developer.
I'm surprised HGTV didn't want to document the build itself. It sounded like they were hands-off, or did I miss a step?
Oh, wait. Of the tiny house?
Right.
They did. So they came.
They did. Okay.
Yep. And it was a whole episode. And it was fun. We got made fun of because Lance decided that he wanted us to dress up to look good on TV.
Yeah.
So
I was like, there's going to be a spin-off.
Yeah.
We'll get a whole season now.
Yep.
They love the male duos, with what is it, the Property Brothers.
Yeah.
That was very hot at that time. I think 2013 is when it aired and everything.
But I was like, sure. I was like, whatever you want, Lance. And then I think they contacted us a couple of years later. Just hey, here's some other stuff, and we were just chatting with them like, you guys are the only two that dressed up for the work job site. And I just pointed. That was him.
Yep. I blame my wife.
Did she tell you?
Yeah, it was actually my wife's idea. She's like, I watch the Property Brothers all the time. They're always so good looking and dressed up, and I'm like, all right, well, yeah, we want a spin-off, clearly, right? Yeah. We don't know.
I didn't think maybe they don't do the actual work where we do the actual work.
Yeah,
I don't know. I haven't watched the show.
Yeah,
Top and Tails, then, huh? All right.
That's the name of the show. We should do a builder show.
Yep.
Top and Tails.
I like it.
All right. So obviously, a lot of lessons learned through that process. And Alex, I did one thing that stirred up in my mind when you said that often there's this disconnect of credit given for those that do the bulk of the design and documentation work versus the finished product. Just as an aside, did you work at all on the World Trade Center project when you were with Libeskind?
No, I was after that. So I was working on shaping islands in Dubai and redoing a whole big train yard in Seoul, Korea. So just when Lance was saying just
giant
1% stuff.
Gotcha. Well, where I'm going with that question is, the other disconnect aside from credit is when I was with AECOM, I did about 18 months of just pure site construction management for the West Side Highway, Chambers Street to the Battery, bordering the World Trade Site, which is why I asked that question. And at some point towards the end, I brought about 20, 25 landscape architects out to the site. And most of them had master's degree. Most of them had double digits years of experience. They had never worn a construction hat. They had never stepped on a job site before. And I was like, my jaw dropped. Like, you've been working for 10 years and you never set foot on a site. So I think that knowledge, that knowing of how things actually go together is often even more valuable than having your name accredited somewhere. But
right. And then I kind of want to expand on that because I think that point is so important. I remember in college, one of our classes, I don't know what it was called, but it was detailing with Martins.
Sure.
And he would draw amazing wall sections. And I swear the whole class was a different wall section after a different wall section after a different wall section. It's way to, waterproof and all that. And they were great. It probably, most of it for most of the people, unless you had construction experience, went in one ear and out the other. It was just like, you're just drawing lines on a paper. And when you cut through windows and you always see like this beam holding it up and it's like, well, wait, is this thing just floating in air? Like just really like simple, stupid things, right?
Yeah.
So then you get on a job site and here's the difference. So now we have construction people working for us. And I say this to some of them when it's appropriate. I go, all structural design is, and I have to speak contractor. I have to speak field language. So structure is stacking on top of other and literally I'll have them come up months later and they go, oh, it takes you a while to realize that epiphany, that it is literally stacking on other,
Yeah.
And why I bring that back to school and being out on the job site, if you could look at, there's probably that typical whole wall floor foundation section where you have the foundation, how it interacts and everything, there's probably 100 of them with different variations that if they were laid out, you couldn't really tell much of the difference before. But after you go to the job site and watch them, you're like, oh, okay, water's going like that. So put the flashing under the tide. Okay, I see how it works. It just simplifies it. Just like where it takes that epiphany for structures is like, is this force stacking on anything or is it stacking on top of a window? That is not the correct way. So being out in the field and being a builder, either one of those helps simplify your job way more than you could imagine.
I believe it. And it compounds over time. And then you're able to, to disseminate even that knowledge to your staff so that they learn that much faster, and it just kind of builds and builds. So that's great. I want to take a little sidetrack onto the money side of things. The state of financing today, have things changed radically in the last 12, 18 months with everything that's going on, and how you're able to, or how either you or your colleagues there in the Colorado area are assessing properties, financing properties, anything like that?
The price of construction, the price of land, and in Colorado, the price of water, on top of the price of the city tap tax and fees, are so skyrocketing high that projects have canceled. Like Nick Renard, he has Nick Reads on our episode. He lives in Florida, and he was sharing a spreadsheet. And I go, hey, your tap taxes and fees budget, don't you need to add a zero to that number? Like add a zero to it. Like, I want to make sure you're not messing up. Like, is this a placeholder? And he's like, oh, no, that's what it costs down here. And that's the major financial thing. Like, a lot of people talk about wood going up. We talk about, roofing going up too. But to have at least in, and Jake, I forgot where you're at, but in Colorado, to have the whole permit fees and the whole water fees go up so dramatically, and then at the same time have city council out of the other side of their mouth say, yeah, we want affordable housing. We don't know how greedy developers can't make affordable housing. And it's like, you are 20% of the budget and you offer us nothing, nothing at all. You just are in our way. So
I think that's a great macro view. The micro view I would give is we are seeing a lot of mother-in-law suites, a lot of ADUs, a lot of whole house remodels be financed. The silver lining is that real estate has increased in a crazy amount over the last 18 to 24 months. A lot of it is because the Fed is printing so much money. And if they're printing that much more money, then what are the hedges against future inflation and inflation of the currency? And I mean inflation into the two categories, right? Inflation of we have more dollars now, right, in circulation. And then the other one of, well, eventually we're going to see inflation of prices, and we're already seeing that with lumber, right? So I'm seeing a lot of projects, people getting, literally between $100,000 and $200,000 of equity in their houses over the last 24 months. That kind of an increase in Colorado, I'm not joking, it is incredible. And then doing a refi because mortgage rates are so low, and pulling all that equity out and doing cash, basically financing everything, these little projects with cash. So there's, it's a balance, right? I mean, there's all these negative things that Alex talked about, but there obviously is silver linings of everything. And that's one of them that I'm seeing. Unfortunately though, the biggest one is lumber driving the cost of everything. I just had a client freak out over the weekend. We are going to build their ADU, and they go, well, this isn't the number you told us in June. And I go, here's a link to the NASDAQ chart. Yeah. And lumber, as you can see, has increased 250%. And when you can provide that kind of hard data, then it helps them step back. But then that kind of speaks to, the way we saved that project from dying. And I'm not sure a lot of builders would have the capability of doing what we can do, because we're wearing two hats. We just had a budget meeting with them, and I had a bunch of architectural suggestions about how we can cut out, $100K on this project and We had the model up in real time. We were showing them what different roof slopes mean for different materials that could save them money, what it looks like to remove a couple walls and just have a carport instead of a garage, how much literally a slab costs per square foot to pour and place, and to be able to just walk through that line item Excel budget spreadsheet that we had coupled with a model was really something that at the end of the meeting they go, oh, well, this is exactly what we were hoping for. We were hoping you would have some solutions very quickly that we could run through. And like I said, if it's builder, Bob, and then Lance and Al being architects, there's going to be a disconnect, and that you're not going to have that kind of flexibility and then still be able to keep the aesthetics and the spirit of the architecture that you're trying to create for people intact, right? Because I'm sure a lot of people who are listening right now have heard and have experienced themselves of builders just coming in and butchering a project. And it's because they're not wearing two hats.
To answer your question from before, Alex, I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. So it's predominantly the question of lumber and labor here. Greenville, South Carolina is the greater, I don't even call it a metro area. It's only about 250,000 people, about halfway between Charlotte and Atlanta. So water tap fees are not a thing here, but
oh my gosh, yeah, that's our.
You don't have to pay.
No, we do, but
tens of thousands of dollars for water.
There's easily 1 or 2 zeros off that number. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, question. This is a total personal question. Have you been up to Tennessee?
A couple times, yes.
What's your thoughts on Tennessee?
Oh.
Because I was talking to someone and they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about moving to Tennessee. And I've never heard anyone saying that. That's like saying I'm thinking about moving to North Dakota, but then I thought about it. I was like, well, it's probably not too hot and it's not too cold. Maybe Tennessee is a good area. So
I mean, I do have some family up there. I've been in Nashville once for a conference. No, it can get pretty hot and pretty cold, I think. I don't think you're dodging any weather bullets there, but as far as building in Tennessee, I couldn't speak to that, but I'm going to assume it's more lax than most. Even difference between here and Charlotte, an hour and a half, it's worlds apart. And then I'm in city limits of Greenville. You go out to the county, and it's not a free for all, but it's not far from it. So there's still policies in place, but it's you can get over the counter permits. So
we love that. We rarely get that, but we love that.
Right.
Yeah. If we do some work in South Dakota, they'll say, go ahead and build it. Tell us when you're done.
Yep.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, I do want to stay on the developer track and certainly dig into your new course, Architect to Builder. But as a backstory to that, you've actually been involved in the online knowledge space, so to speak, for some time now, developing products for Revit originally. How have what lessons have you had to learn in transferring, just transferring knowledge to a client, now transferring knowledge to a web page and lots of different customers and clients?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. One is a lot of people, especially in this space, are visual learners. So having that came from teaching Revit, personally, but via video rather than a textbook. Like literally that was how it was done, was you buy a textbook and you learn Revit. And maybe some universities are still like that. And it's a visual program or visual people. Please do not do that. The second thing I learned about the course was, because this was, when we started it, Revit, Furniture Revit Rocket Ship, it was a while ago. It was at least 8-10 years ago.
Yep. And
I was nervous about getting feedback. I was nervous because I thought it was a criticism. But now with this new one, I encourage feedback, because even if it is criticism, I can say why we're not doing it that way or whatever. But a lot of times it's something that I can help implement, answer a question, do something like that. And the other huge lesson that we started developing this course, and then there was kind of a revelation to it, back to our roots, was, okay, if we could make the firm back 10 years ago the way that we wanted it to work structurally. And we could make our Revit template mimic how the construction process works. There's so many benefits to that. There's so many benefits to having a framing floor and then your finished floor, a framing wall and then your finished wall, not only for takeoffs, but just the sequence, and then mimicking that sequence, knowing what it is construction. You're more confident in your answer. You're more confident in how it's built. To now, even in that template, we are having schedules that have, cost to it, so that we can easily estimate costs. And even the way we organize pages, like the way the foundation page comes first, rather structural engineers like to work from top to bottom. Well, you build from bottom to top, right? So everything is this mimicking. So in the architecture to builder course, not only, we walk you through the sequences, but, there's resources and templates too that you need to be a builder. And one of the big ones, and this one kind of points it out the best, is the cost estimate. And when I was making this, we obviously had our own. Then I reached out to other people, got other people's, got banks, and started looking at all this, making sure that I didn't miss anything. But then it just hit me, wait, what's our core tenet? What core helps people? Why don't we mimic the way construction happens? So why don't we put it in the order that construction happens? And that even means a plumbing bid, they're going to have rough plumbing and final plumbing. Well, break it up in the order and then just have a little category that has, your plumbing, so that you can sort by plumbing, so that when the plumbing bid comes up, it doesn't take much to sort it by that way. But at least you're eliminating errors. At least you're mimicking construction. At least if you're new, you can know the process that you're going at. And it even like if you've built for a while and you have to do draws, it's not a big deal that when you do draws, you do them from categories, and the categories are all up and down the spreadsheet. But if you're concentrating most of them and then you're like eliminating them and moving them to the next step, there's this book, 2 Second Lean, Lance talked about in the pre-interview, when we were just, not pre-interview, but what we were just talking about. He talks about 2-second improvements. Like, oh, that's it. Besides mimicking how it gets built, like that's just a benefit, another 2-second improvement that helps you organize and be clear on what you're doing. So that was a big lesson, is everything we try to do is how to take these forms and ways of thinking that, are out there, everyone's kind of see, or you could piece together, and really refine it to, wait, how does this mimic reality? How does this mimic construction? And that has benefited us so much that we hope it will benefit other people too.
Yeah, and it really speaks to two things, I think, Jake. Though, going back to what you mentioned earlier about the landscape architects and their first time ever being on a job site, you could take this course. The idea with this course is that I'm not suggesting that you have to have a certain level of construction experience to even get licensed, but your level of, you gain a lot of that with construction administration. But you could, the way this is set up fundamentally, like Alex talked about, is in sequence. So even from just looking at the cost estimate and how the spreadsheet is laid out, you understand the general sequence of construction. And then maybe in your first couple projects, you're going to lean on maybe hiring a third-party consultant, or just some really good set of subcontractors that maybe have built your other projects just as an architect. About, you go and interview them and talk to them about when you're getting and meeting them for their bids and stuff, about the sequence that you're suggesting. And then once you get through it once, it's like riding a bicycle. The second thing that it does is it's just like everything that we do with Revit Rocket Ship. And it's how Nick Renard, Dig Architecture, is how he trained his firm. It's how we trained our firm. It's how we train all of the students we teach at CU Boulder. But everybody is on the same page. Somebody could take a model. Let's say somebody like was sick for 2 weeks or something. Somebody could take a model that somebody else was working on, and they could pick it up and know exactly what to look for, how it's modeled. Everybody's on the same page. So the same thing goes with this course. Is as some of our folks are doing more project management on the construction standpoint, if we're acting as general contractors, well, you always need a project manager. They can take our spreadsheet. They can take the sequence of components that we put in and understand, and we're all on the same page about where we're at in the process. And it's sort of this baton tossing that goes on back and forth.
Yeah.
So you've got the structure of the course down, and I had it on screen here. The actual production of it, have you found, or have you come to find that it's as easy as jumping on a webcam as we are now? Or is it a lot more nuanced and highly produced? What can folks expect?
You can go either way. And the Revit one is, more just capturing the screen and the camera. But one of the construction workers that's now basically one of our foremen, his prior job was a producer TV show. So he has cameras, professional mics, the lights, and everything. So we said, hey, you don't have to go out to the job site today. Come in, set up all your stuff, and film us. So we got a professional cameraman with the mics that go up here and all this, and that you accidentally mess up all the time. So the majority of the videos are that. There's a couple where it was just me because I wanted to share the screen, and it was more about the screen. So I didn't want to call Bill off a job site to professionally film me when we're looking at the screen the majority of the time. Mm-hmm. That's not what you have to do, but that's what is in this course.
Gotcha. Any videos on site itself? Or is that something that you do just in the course of your business anyhow?
No, we're thinking about posting more on-site videos. Lance actually had this great idea that same guy, like, let's get him a GoPro so that when he's there
on and go.
Yeah. And then have him edit it and put him up. But it's more about this one, at least, is the structure of, okay, you're already doing architecture. How do you transition that client? What's the best way to do? Then how do you set that new business up? Everything from, getting your license, being a contractor, setting up the files, what do you need to do? And then how do you execute that properly?
Yeah.
For profit.
And it's
from architecture to profitecture. I don't know who has that name.
Yeah. And what it does is, to go back one more time, Alex was talking about, he was trying to explain to Bill, is his name, is our foreman who does the videography for us. He was telling Bill, Bill was mystified by the construction process. Like, it just looks so daunting to people who have never really done it, or if you just dabbled in it, especially from ground up, literally from excavating. I mean, even for me, in some of the first projects, it was like, oh, I don't understand exactly how this is going to work. I'm going to rely on the subs or whatever. But it demystifies it all. Mm-hmm. And really, really opens it up and shows everybody that you can do this too. Like, you're already swimming in the code book all day long. You're already drawing and detailing everything all day long. The hardest part is honestly just you going from white collar, dealing with blue collar folks all day long, because there is a different psychology there. And so, if I had to sum it up, that's really the hardest thing. But if you already are going out and getting clients, you already are maintaining clients, you clearly, hopefully have friends, you know how to manage and work with people and be happy.
Yep. And the other thing too is, if someone just threw you into, hey, make an architecture set, and you didn't work at a firm or anything like that, it would be hard to piece together what you need, when you need to do it, what's that. So the course also helps, okay, what needs to be done in construction, who needs to do it, and when do they need to do it. That's the other large part that is kind of new to architecture. You kind of know it. But again, like, if you weren't there for when they were hooking up the pipes and putting all that together, you might not know who even does that, Mm-hmm. So it helps with that too.
That's great. So you mentioned Nick Renard of Dig Architecture a couple times. In previous interviews, you mentioned Jonathan Siegel as an, if not a mentor, an inspiration, certainly. Who else have you drawn inspiration from or mentorship from? And this 11 plus years you've been working as F9.
Jerry Bolin, a local architect here, kind of took us under his wing when we were here. So he's been absolutely amazing human being. He's absolutely great.
David Mitchell. David Mitchell is our structural engineer. I actually was his minister. Is that what it is?
Yeah. When you get married, the person.
Yeah. Like I attend
The official.
Yeah, the wedding officiant. Yeah.
Right.
So we're very good friends with him. He's an older gentleman. Probably could be retired technically by age, but we did so much structural drafting under his direction early on in F9's existence. It gave us such a different perspective and level of confidence, I think, than maybe a lot of architects and maybe even builders, that we can walk in successfully and really understand, basic structures and how they're loaded down, to even some pretty complex ones where we can start doing some pretty cool structural acrobatics like we did in the first tiny house and the second tiny houses. And even in even in the office we're sitting in now, I know there's some special cantilevers and stuff that took some acrobatical thinking to make happen. I don't think we'd be the same firm if it wasn't for somebody like David Mitchell, especially David Mitchell specifically, willing to work with us in that manner of, we're going to do all the structural drafting, all the structural modeling, and he's going to be the mentor that really overlays all of that oversight on top of us, teaches us basic. He even helped out when I went to go take the ARE test way back when, about basic calculations and stuff like that. And that has filtered all the way down to people who just start at F9. They are going to be doing structural drafting under the direction of us and David within the first 6 months. And it just kind of puts them at this whole other level way early in their career, I think, to be able to start thinking about that and confidently modeling stuff. I don't know if you had this experience too, Jake, but I certainly did. I know Alex did, especially when you're in college, of like, what is the thickness of a floor? Like, what should a thickness of how should I represent this at a conceptual level? And I remember us, and then so one more thing I would say is that was mentorship wise is the professors at North Dakota State. We just can't say enough about our alma mater and our university up there. They do such a good job of blending the science and the art that when Alex and I went into, he went and interviewed all over New York. I went and interviewed all over Colorado, very, very prestigious firms. And one thing that we heard over and over again was when they looked at our building sections, rather our section perspectives, they were like, oh my God, you have the correct floor thickness in, or at least it looks like it. Yeah. And so that kind of stuff. If we didn't have those kind of people, those mentors above us, I don't think we would be where we're at.
Yeah. And when we were putting together the course, there's some interviews with builders, and I talked to other builders, and a theme that I learned was a lot of them got into it because of the family business. The dad was in it, their uncle was in it, and they could rely on them. And I go, it makes so much sense. And they were their mentors. And the course, even though it costs some money, honestly, the return, I don't know how to convey this, but the return would be way more than worth it by an order of magnitude. That's another reason why we're putting it out there, is because we had these mentors help us. And you can't always find them. They aren't always your dad or your uncle or something like that. So how can this be put out there if you're, I don't know, in the middle of Iowa? I don't know why I'm picking on Iowa. It doesn't matter. It could be any place. And you don't have that relationship, but you want to get this knowledge. That's another motive for us putting this out there.
And that's where I think the online education space, it's just in its infancy, really. Who knows what university training is going to look like when our kiddos are that age. Mine are 3 and 5. My 5-year-old says he wants to be an architect, but he also says he wants to be a garbage man and 12 other things. It depends on the hour. So,
well, your kids are more advanced than my kid. He still wants to be a train.
Just a train.
Oh, all right. So Thomas the Train. He's going to put his face in the end. Yeah, perfect.
Yep. So I have a future train in my family.
Yeah.
I do want to thank you guys for taking the time here. And Architecture Builder course, it's available through teachable.com. The website is architectsguide2.com. You can also visit F9 Productions if you'd like to learn more about what Alex and Lance have been up to or getting into. Again, guys, thank you so much for spending time with me and the audience here.
Thanks a lot, Jake. This was great.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, thanks for joining me this week. And along the lines of putting out, recording, promoting your next online course or your services as an architect, landscape architect, or business owner in general, we are marketers first. We often have to be, or we always actually have to be marketers first. If we can't sell what we do, if we can't sell to who we serve, and we can't tell them how we serve them, we're not going to be in business for very long. So I do want to introduce to you, and I've been saying it on the last couple podcasts that I am running, a bootcamp all about your marketing message. The Position to Profit Bootcamp is Tuesday and Wednesday, February 23rd and 24th, beginning at noon Eastern. It's absolutely free. Love to have you join me there, where we're going to talk about messaging at the identity level, messaging to the identity of your potential ideal clients, not just your expertise, not just your experience, and not just your portfolio. How to craft the right messages, and that could be on your website, that could be in your Instagram captions, that could be in your face-to-face, albeit probably behind a mask, interactions with potential clients, explaining who you are here to serve as a firm owner, as a design professional. And then day 2, we'll get into the actual language to help you not just pitch your services, not just try to convince your clients that you're the best one in town, rather have that content do the selling for you. So if you visit profitecturebydesign.com/bootcamp, you can get signed up for that. And I'll leave you with the quote of the week here, which I think is pretty appropriate for this week's show, from Milton Berle. If opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. Depending on whether you want to go into online courses, or you want to venture into development, or you want to get your general contractor's license, there are 100 ways to slice this watermelon that is business ownership, that is life, right? So I encourage you to explore and be open to options there. If you haven't already, leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd love to hear from you. And any other notes or any other guests you'd love to see on the show, shoot me a DM at Jake Krakowski, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And until next week, go out there and make it a great week, because our success is inevitable. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you stay up to date with future episodes. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at Jake Krakowski. And for show notes and much more, visit profitecturebydesign.com/podcast.